The moment Tom Bower opened his mouth, the illusion shattered, because what he revealed wasn't just scandal, it was something darker, colder, and far more calculated. A story involving a dying queen, a desperate couple running out of money, and a ruthless plan that insiders say crossed the line no royal had ever crossed before, and at the center of it all stood Meghan Markle, accused of turning the most sacred, fragile final chapter of Queen Elizabeth's life into something that insiders now whisper was meant to be sold to Netflix for millions.
And I think that they don't know what to do other than to try and come back to Britain and rebuild themselves as some sort of members of the royal family.
It's a terrible failure of judgment, a shocking betrayal, fundamental flaws.
And completely unforeseen, but the right thing to do. I mean, the point was that we'd always criticised Charles for being hesitant and backing away from controversy.
Well, absolutely. This is a real crisis for the monarchy, and I think there's more to come out.
See them filming and including in the Netflix series a private text message. Okay, they don't reveal the contents, but clearly a negative text message that William...
Absolutely. What we're really now seeing is that both of them, having posed as the victim for so long, are really the aggressors. And what I really thought at the end of it as well was this, which I think is a very, very pertinent point.
Complete catastrophe.
I get a little heat. I get pushback when I say, what did the Queen think she was paying $12 million for? I mean, does the previous monarch...
Which is very revelatory, as you know, about Meghan and Harry. I got absolutely no help from the palace whatsoever, on the contrary.
In the godforsaken Sandringham estate. Believe me, it's really depressing there, and it doesn't stop raining at the moment. And what it showed was that she wasn't going to make any concessions to the class and the sort of people which she was going to marry into.
It's amazing how she can be so judgmental towards them. And I mean this with the royal family too, but take everything she needs to help elevate herself. You know, like if you can't stand these people or the idea of class, Harry and Meghan chase the shiny people, chase money, chase opportunities without doing their due diligence, and could end up in a similar scenario where their private emails and text messages might be read in discovery through a civil trial, or might end up out in the world.
Let me move on to Meghan and Harry. I think that they are at the moment facing a real crisis. Meghan and Harry's crisis, completely of their own making, is they have no major projects, no major money earned.
It began with the balcony. Not just any balcony, but the balcony. The sacred stone ledge at Buckingham Palace that separates royalty from everyone else. The place where only true members of the monarchy stand, while tens of thousands scream their loyalty from below, and according to Tom Bower, Meghan and Harry didn't see it. As tradition, they saw it as content, something to capture, something to monetize, something to transform into a weapon to revive their fading relevance in America, because by then the money had started drying up, the deals weren't delivering, and the only thing they had left to sell was proximity to the royal family itself. And what makes this revelation even more disturbing is how methodical it allegedly was, because insiders claim this wasn't spontaneous, this wasn't emotional, this wasn't a loving return to family roots, this was strategy, cold and deliberate, designed to create images that would remind the world they were still royal enough to matter, still connected enough to sell, still valuable enough to Netflix to justify another deal. And Tom Bower didn't whisper this quietly. He sat down and said it directly, exposing what he claims was a carefully planned attempt to reinsert themselves into royal imagery at a moment when the Queen herself was frail, isolated, and nearing the end of her life, and suddenly the entire Jubilee wasn't just a celebration, it became something else entirely, a battleground between tradition and ambition.
You've been saying this all along. They only care about money. And now we have proof.
I think it's mixed. I think that once she saw Meghan when she came to London in 2016, 2018, and she reached out to Victoria to get freebies. And I must say, it's always beyond Meghan. Meghan doesn't believe in reconciliation. Look at her appalling relationship with her father. She's a hard nut.
Meghan left Britain and then did the Oprah Winfrey interview. It's been really poisonous.
The balcony wasn't just stone and railings, it was power, legitimacy, survival. And Meghan understood that better than anyone, because without that image, without that visual confirmation of belonging, the Sussex brand would continue bleeding value. And insiders claim she knew it, Harry knew it, and Netflix knew it, because their entire future depended on convincing the world they were still inside the royal circle, not abandoned outside it like exiles pretending to be relevant. And when they returned to Britain, it wasn't just family visiting, it was a production team without cameras, a script without actors, and a checklist without mercy.
Harry and Meghan's desperation to provide Netflix with a royal balcony shot. Can you walk me through that? Because it's just so dirty. It's so filthy when you think about their objectives in going back and having that moment with the British royal family, where I think that they might have been booed during that trip. Correct me if I'm wrong, but they literally just go back so they can film things with Netflix, and they've got a checklist of what they want. And they're just using this family to build their own profile. And it makes me sick.
Well, I think in my book, I explain how
that checklist, insiders claim, was chillingly specific because it allegedly outlined moments they needed, moments they could package, moments they could sell, and at the very top of that list was the balcony shot, this single image that could revive their brand overnight, because one photograph of Meghan standing beside the Queen again would erase months of rejection, months of silence, months of humiliation in Hollywood, where doors were slowly closing and calls were slowly going unanswered. And while the public saw a couple returning for family, insiders claim they saw something else entirely. Two individuals fighting to reclaim relevance before it disappeared forever. But the moment that truly stunned palace insiders wasn't the balcony, it was Windsor.
It's more than proximity, it's membership.
Yeah.
When you stand on the balcony, you're part of the royal family. You're part of the target of tens of thousands of people in the Mall down to Buckingham Palace, cheering and attesting to their support for the monarchy. So to be on the balcony with the King and Queen and William and Kate would have been absolutely invaluable to Meghan and Harry. Of course, that was denied to them, and now they needed even more.
Because Windsor wasn't public. Windsor was private. Windsor was intimate. And the Queen wasn't strong anymore. She wasn't standing tall on balconies. She wasn't greeting crowds. She was fading quietly, surrounded by only the most trusted figures. And when Harry and Meghan arrived with their children, palace insiders initially believed it was love, reconciliation, closure. But Tom Bower claims that wasn't the full story, because behind the smiles and greetings was allegedly something else. Intent, preparation, expectation, and what they allegedly wanted wasn't just memories, it was footage, something to preserve, something to use, something that would turn one of the most vulnerable moments in royal history into something the world could stream.
But she has been a huge curse on the British royal family and on Britain now even more. And one doesn't know how her daughters are going to cope with it. I mean, she was pretty ruthless in her use of her daughter.
The room fell silent the moment those 5 words were spoken. No cameras, no pictures. And according to insiders, everything changed in that instant, because suddenly the plan stopped. Suddenly the expectation collapsed. Suddenly the invisible production that had been quietly unfolding inside their minds hit a wall that couldn't be negotiated, couldn't be persuaded, couldn't be manipulated. And palace insiders said that moment revealed everything, because it exposed a clash between two realities. One rooted in legacy, dignity, and protection, and another rooted in survival, monetization, and exposure.
There was a very important moment where they brought their children to meet the Queen in Windsor. And as they walk into the room to meet the Queen, a lady in waiting steps forward and says, "No cameras, no pictures." And that's the one reason they came to England, because they wanted those pictures for their own film. And of course, the one thing they weren't allowed to do was use the Jubilee in the Netflix series as far as they wanted. So it was touch and go, but they were pretty strong here. that
Insiders claim that was the moment palace officials realized exactly what they were dealing with, because this wasn't just about family anymore. This was about control over narrative, control over imagery, control over legacy itself, and protecting the queen in her final months became a priority that overrode everything else. Because once something is filmed, once something is captured, it can never be taken back. It can only be sold, replayed, and exploited forever. And while this was happening behind closed doors, another storm was exploding publicly, one involving Prince Andrew, Epstein, and secrets that insiders claim were even darker than anyone imagined. Because Tom Bower revealed something that terrified palace officials: the belief that video evidence might exist, recordings that could destroy the monarchy's reputation overnight, recordings that forced King Charles to act quickly, decisively, and brutally to protect what remained. And while Andrew was being stripped, isolated, and removed, insiders claim Harry and Meghan saw something else entirely: opportunity. Because chaos weakens institutions, chaos creates openings, and openings create leverage. And suddenly, their return wasn't just emotional, it was strategic, positioned at a moment when the monarchy itself was vulnerable and desperate to avoid further damage. And according to Tom Bower, that desperation wasn't one-sided, because Harry and Meghan themselves were allegedly facing something even more frightening than rejection: irrelevance, because their projects were failing, their brand was weakening, and their financial future was uncertain. And the only thing that could reverse that decline was the one thing they had walked away from: the royal family itself. And that is why insiders claim everything came back to the balcony, because the balcony wasn't just stone, it was salvation, it was legitimacy, it was the difference between being royalty and being forgotten. The truth that insiders began whispering after Windsor wasn't just disturbing, it was terrifying for the monarchy itself, because what Tom Bower exposed next revealed something far more dangerous than a simple family feud. It exposed a financial clock ticking loudly behind the scenes, a countdown that insiders say was pushing Harry and Meghan into decisions that grew more desperate, more calculated, and more aggressive with every passing month. Because according to those watching closely, their American dream wasn't unfolding the way they had promised the world, and the carefully crafted image of independence, wealth, and unstoppable influence was beginning to crack in ways they could no longer hide. The Netflix deal that once looked like salvation had become uncertainty. Their brand projects stalled before they could fully launch, and insiders claim the lifestyle they built in Montecito, the mansion, the staff, the security, the image, was bleeding money faster than new opportunities could replace it. And suddenly the only thing left with guaranteed value wasn't Hollywood, wasn't podcasting, wasn't lifestyle branding, it was royalty. The one identity they could never fully escape, and the one asset they could never fully replicate outside the palace walls. And this is where Tom Bower's revelation becomes even more explosive, because he claims the palace understood exactly what was happening. They understood the pattern, the positioning, the slow attempt to rebuild proximity to the crown, not through reconciliation, but through visibility, through calculated appearances designed to remind the world that despite everything, Harry and Meghan still belonged in the royal orbit. Because belonging meant value, belonging meant relevance, belonging meant survival, and without belonging, they risked becoming something Hollywood discards without hesitation. Yesterday's headline. But inside palace walls, another force had already stepped in, someone far less emotional and far more decisive than King Charles, someone insiders say saw the threat clearly and had no intention of allowing it to grow, and that person was Prince William. Because William wasn't thinking about reconciliation. He wasn't thinking about forgiveness. He was thinking about protection. Protection of the monarchy, protection of its future, protection of his children, and protection of the fragile stability that had already been shaken by Andrew's scandal. Insiders claim William understood something critical, something that made him far more dangerous than anyone realized. He understood that image is power, and whoever controls the image controls the future. And that meant controlling the balcony. Because insiders say William knew exactly why that balcony mattered so much. He knew that one photograph, one appearance, one moment of shared royal imagery could reset everything for Harry and Meghan overnight, turning exile into legitimacy, turning irrelevance into authority, and turning distance into renewed influence. And William wasn't going to allow that, because once granted, it could never be undone. Once seen, it could never be unseen. Tom Bower revealed that behind the scenes, the palace had already begun quietly reinforcing boundaries, reinforcing distance, reinforcing the message that there was no path back to the version of royalty Harry and Meghan once occupied. And insiders claim that message wasn't delivered publicly. It was delivered silently, through absence, through exclusion, through the quiet refusal to grant them the moments they needed to rebuild their image. Because denial was the only weapon weapon the palace had left, and that denial terrified them. Because insiders claim Harry and Meghan understood the truth, without royal imagery, their brand would slowly suffocate. Their connection to royalty wasn't just symbolic, it was commercial. It was their last remaining source of leverage in a world that had begun questioning their relevance, their authenticity, and their influence. And without new royal imagery, Netflix couldn't sell proximity. Without proximity, there was no mystique. Without mystique, there was no audience. And that's why insiders claim they kept trying. They kept positioning themselves around royal events, around royal milestones, around royal appearances, hoping for even the smallest moment of visual association, hoping for a single photograph that could be interpreted as reconciliation, because perception is everything, and even the illusion of acceptance could be monetized. But William wasn't playing that game, because insiders say William had already drawn the line long before the public realized it, and that line wasn't emotional, it was strategic, because he understood something his father struggled to accept, that Harry and Meghan no longer operated within the institution, they operated outside it, beyond its control, beyond its influence, beyond its ability to manage their narrative once they returned to California. And that made them unpredictable. That made them dangerous. Tom Bower revealed something chilling, that palace officials feared what Harry and Meghan might do next if their financial and reputational pressure continued increasing, because desperate people don't retreat quietly. They escalate, they push harder, they take bigger risks, and insiders claim the palace understood that every denial increased the likelihood of retaliation, whether through interviews, documentaries, or revelations designed to shift public sympathy back in their favor. And yet, despite that risk, William remained unmoved, because for him, the stakes weren't personal, they were generational. He wasn't protecting himself, he was protecting the future king after him. He was protecting the survival of the monarchy itself in a world that had become ruthless, skeptical, and unforgiving. And that's why insiders say the balcony remains forbidden territory, because granting that moment wouldn't just be symbolic forgiveness, it would be strategic surrender. It would give Harry and Meghan exactly what they needed: visual legitimacy, renewed commercial power, and confirmation that despite everything, they still had a place inside the royal structure. And William refuses to allow that, because insiders say he understands the final truth that Tom Bower's revelations have exposed, that the battle isn't about family anymore. It's about narrative. It's about control. It's about survival. And as long as William controls the balcony, he controls the future. Because without that balcony, without that image, without that confirmation of belonging, Harry and Meghan remain suspended in a painful in-between state, not fully royal, not fully independent, caught between two worlds where one has rejected them and the other has stopped believing in them. And that, insiders say, is the real crisis Tom Bower has exposed. Not just what happened at Windsor, not just what happened during the Jubilee, but what happens next, because the palace has drawn its line. William has made his decision, and the balcony, the symbol of everything, remains out of reach. Thing remains out of reach. Thing remains out of reach. Thing remains...